Hi, everybody. Thanks for joining us today on Winsight Live. Here in New York, we're expecting a first blizzard of the season. At least 12 inches here are going to fall tomorrow. That's great news for grocers as usual, and something that we didn't get last winter. So another bonus coming on their way for grocers here in the Northeast. Down south in sunny Florida, Winn-Dixie has opened another two former Lucky's Market stores. Winn-Dixie, you might recall, acquired several former Lucky stores earlier this year when that retailer went out of business. These are interesting transitions for Winn-Dixie, which tends to run a larger size grocery store. These are, that in-betweener size, 29,000 square feet, 36,000 square feet versus the 50,000. And it's interesting to see. We got a lot of great pictures from Winn-Dixie up on Winsight Grocery Business that you could see how they were able to sort of adapt to things that made Lucky's popular, which included, the in-store bars where people could buy beer and wine and shop. A heavy emphasis on local products, prepared foods, fresh and organic, and kind of adapt that to their regular format, Bill.
So, John, it's interesting because right before we went live, Pat was mentioning also, because Pat's located in New York, that with this blizzard, the restaurants are really faced with a problem that a lot of them who have built the outdoor dining space might have to take them down, because certainly those were not built with the idea of having 12 inches of snow, on top of them. So it'll be interesting to see what happens, over the next day. I want to switch to some marketing stories. One which I think is brilliant and one I don't understand. So I don't know if you've seen, but McDonald's is giving away free food starting December 14th, which is yesterday. And it's tied with different celebrities like the Griswolds. Yesterday, they were giving a free double cheeseburger. Then Gizmo, a free 6-piece nuggets on December 19th. And then Frank Costanza and the rest of us, free bakery item on December 23rd. So they're doing this for 10 days. But what's interesting about it is you have to use the app in order to get it. And you have to buy at least $1 worth of something in order to get the free food. So I think that this is a brilliant way to get people to really get accustomed to using the McDonald's app. And probably a lot of new people are going to be using it. So I think that that's a really smart idea. And I want to get, your thoughts on it. And then the bad idea, Popeyes is launching beignets, beignets that are filled with Hershey's chocolate on the inside. Now they're saying it's temporary. That's what they said when they launched their chicken sandwich, but it was so popular that they kept it as a regular menu item. But would you guys go to a Popeyes to get a beignet?
Well, I just wrote about that today, actually, in my menu newsletter, and they are a New Orleans originating restaurant, so they have a lot of New Orleans. So that's why I think they went with the beignets, and they're also marketing them along with a camouflage shirt, so that when you get the powdered sugar on your shirt, it won't show because of the camouflage platters. So I think that's pretty clever.
I think it's very clever. I just don't, get fried chicken and beignet. And I know that it's fried dough, but still, it's just a disconnect for me. What do you guys think about the whole McDonald's thing?
I think it's a great idea. I mean, whenever, whether it's a restaurant or a convenience store or what have you, the toughest thing about a new app is adoption. And if you can have a scheme to get people on board to at least try it, then they're way more likely to stick with it. So I think it's a great move.
Yeah, I agree with you. So Jen, talk to us a little bit about the new Chicago Amazon Fresh store.
Yeah, so this is Amazon's 5th store, but it's first in the greater Chicago area. And it opened on December 10th, and we had our own Christine there to take photos outside. And maybe she can talk a little bit more about, she felt like it was pretty busy given that we're in the middle of a pandemic, and they're certainly enticing shoppers inside. They've got all these signs out front with, great prices on pizza slices, chicken, rotisserie chickens, bananas, kind of these same, low price items that they've launched in their 4 California stores. And then as one of our colleagues, Christina, came up with this great idea of that, how are we going to kind of track all these, Amazon Fresh is just opening all these stores. And then there's a new, we just read today that Amazon Go is going to open up in downtown Seattle, a new location. And then there's Amazon Grocery. And so how do we, kind of keep track of all of this for our readers? And so Christina and our art department got together and they've launched this really cool Amazon tracker. So you can sort of see on the map where the coming locations are and what's already opened. So, the Chicago area has another 3 stores that are set to open any day now, the Schaumburg, Oak Lawn, and Bloomingdale. So a lot of excitement around the Amazon Fresh stores. But I don't know, Christine, if you have anything to add to that, because you were there on the scene.
Sure. I thought it was interesting, the choice of location, looking at where this first one opened and a couple of other ones. It's right by a really big high school in a growing kind of commercial corridor. It's an area that has seen a lot of residential development and higher end residential development in about the past 15 years. And again, looking at the crowd outside, it was a range of ages at, 10:30 on a Friday morning in December. Not strictly younger shoppers, not strictly older shoppers, but again, as you said, pretty populated for what you could expect when it's 30 degrees out and gray, kind of snowing.
So Pat, DoorDash, tell us, what happened with their IPO, and then I have a couple questions for you on it.
Sure. So my colleague Joe wrote a story about DoorDash's IPO, which happened last Wednesday. And as soon they predicted that shares would go for about $102 per share on Tuesday night, but they got as high as $195 before closing, wow. And the closing price was $188. So that's an increase of more than 80%, which is pretty incredible. And now my colleague Jonathan Mays, who's the editor of Restaurant Business, he wrote a story about how DoorDash has a higher valuation now than most restaurant chains that it delivers for. The only ones that have a higher one are McDonald's and Starbucks. So that's pretty crazy when you think about it. And it scares me a little because I was around for the .com boom and bust, and this sounds kind of similar.
So Pat, what I don't understand though is why the valuation would be so high when we're starting to see more cities and states limit the kind of commissions that DoorDash can make, and putting in more regulations on these delivery companies because of whether it's being unfair to workers or the whole tip thing or the percentage that's being charged with restaurants. All that seems to be changing rapidly. So I was shocked when I saw the valuation.
Well, they do have 50% of the delivery market right now. Right. Excuse me. And people are really going to continue that lifestyle of having restaurant delivery for the next half a year at least. It's kind of like, ingrained in what we do every day now. So I think they don't expect it to go away. I mean, most analysts say that this growth can't keep up, once the pandemic is over. But I guess a lot of investors see that it's a good deal now because delivery is going to continue to surge at least for the next 6 months.
Oh.
So I thought it was kind of interesting. I just happened to be doing some last minute online holiday shopping last night, and I think it was Macy's, and Macy's is offering same day delivery, and their partner's DoorDash. I had no idea, but you wonder if you're partnering with somebody who's got deeper pockets, like a national department store chain, that provides a little bit of cushion and expansion room.
And we're seeing the same thing happen with Instacart, where Instacart is not just focused on grocery, but Instacart has a whole bunch of non-grocery retailers as well.
A lot of the people who are actually going back to offices now, because a lot, the restaurants near them aren't open, are using DoorDash too. So there's really, I guess the market just is going to keep increasing as long as this pandemic drags on.
Yeah. So, Christine, talk to us a little bit about your interview with the new CEO of SpartanNash.
Yeah, Phil. So I had a chance to submit some questions to Tony Sarsam. He took over at SpartanNash in September. SpartanNash flies a little bit maybe below the radar of a Kroger or a Fresh Time, but they actually operate about 150 company-owned stores across the country, and they're a distributor for a couple thousand independent grocers and military commissaries nationwide as well. They're based out of Grand Rapids, Michigan. That's where the Spartan, the name comes from with Michigan State over in East Lansing. But Tony took over at a really interesting kind of inflection point, seems like, for the company. Financial results for the year have been, okay, fair. But SpartanNash has had a partnership, a supplier partnership with Amazon since 2016. And a couple weeks after Tony took over in late September, there was an announcement of a new commercial agreement between Amazon and SpartanNash that could have Amazon potentially over the next 7 years acquiring up to about 12.5% of outstanding shares in SpartanNash. So with everything that's happening now, as far as we talked about, Amazon's expansion of Amazon Fresh, which is, they've got the one store here right now and the few stores in California, but all indicators are that we're poised for a really big expansion. If SpartanNash is playing in that field, that's some interesting territory for Tony to be leading. He previously was CEO of Borden Dairy, and he had stated on the first quarterly earnings call that he was a part of last month that he was kind of knee deep in finding areas for improvement. He saw that there was a great team in place, from top level down to store associate level, with some really interesting innovations going on to serve customers. But he saw room for operational efficiencies. So one of the things he's looking at is updating kind of the IT infrastructure, getting things in place. And he said in this interview, we've got a great team. He said, we're not as nimble as we need to be. And that's a really interesting point, to recognize that amidst all of the change that's happening right now, that's happened throughout this year, how fast you pivot, how fast you get to your pivot matters. So it was a really interesting conversation with him. One of my favorite things too, I'll just add quickly, was he talked about having a large family. He's got kids ranging in age from middle school all the way through recently graduated college. And I asked him, how have they influenced you or your view of food service or vice versa? And he talked about, kids aren't sitting down around it's not a big family group around the dinner table like it used to be when my wife and I were growing up, he said. And he said, we really have to meet that need for convenience in the moment. I want it now, indulgent, whatever you want. And I always think it's interesting, the different perspectives that can be brought to the table.
Yeah, I think that SpartanNash over the past few years have really done some interesting things. Even if you look at their private brands, and I forgot what it's called, but they've got a bunch of products that are geographic based. And what I mean by that is they've got, I think it's a coffee that comes from New Orleans, and they're really trying to be geo-specific as much as they can with these products, and they're fabulous. It really reminded me of when Loblaws came out with President's Choice years ago, that they've really put a lot of work in their private brands.
Yeah, they're really interested in that and the in-store experience to make things different too. He talked about starting to grill up sliders on demand and just being that, that go-to service, being that trusted name. You got to think too, in dealing with military commissaries, when there's a lot of pride in an area, in a brand, in a geographic space like that, that's going to be really interesting to see where things go.
Yeah, absolutely. And the whole Amazon thing, without a doubt. So Jackson, battery recycling?
Yeah, it's a little out of the blue. News about different regulations that states and different areas of the country and then the world are bringing down in order to reach carbon neutral by a certain date. There isn't just one way to make an electric vehicle work. One of the biggest criticisms of refueling electric vehicles is that it takes a long time. It takes way longer than it does to fuel up a gas-powered car. It could take around 30 minutes or maybe even an hour, depending on what kind of car you have. So with battery swapping, it's just like what it sounds. You just replace the battery in the car with another, you recharge that battery, and then you give that battery to another one that's coming down the line, essentially enabling you to charge these cars as fast as if you were pumping gas. And now this is just one study from a firm in London called IHS Markit. We've been on them a lot for fuel and other studies like this. And they said that new batteries like increase by 580% by 2030. Now, this is just one study, and this is certainly not a crystal ball looking into the future, but I think it definitely speaks to the interest in electric cars and the interest in making this work for our roadways.
Yeah, and I've also started to see a lot more autonomous trucks that are battery powered as well coming out there. And for me, the autonomous truck is probably something that's needed a lot more than autonomous vehicles. Because if we look at what's gone on with the supply chain, one of the biggest issues were having trucks in the right place to bring the food from the farm to the supermarket or to the C-store and so on. So I'd love to see, some of these tests that are taking place on autonomous trucks really hit the ground running.
Well, Phil, if I can mention something about that, actually Christine can talk about it because I just looked at a story that she wrote about that this morning. But Walmart gave an update on their partnership with Gatik. Gatik is a pretty interesting company, where a lot of the early experiments in autonomous cars were about bringing them from the store to the person. Walmart and Gatik is looking at this as a way to bring things from stores to stores. And there's inherent issues in a delivery from a robot, and that you have to be at home to retrieve the order from the robot, whereas you are moving a e-commerce order from one Walmart store across town to another Walmart store. Well, that gives them the opportunity to put all the picking labor in one store, sweat that really hard, and leave the other store, don't interfere with the customer experience at the other store, but offer shoppers at that store the same conveniences that the first store has. So it's an efficiency play. It's a pretty interesting technology play, and it doesn't necessarily interfere with the customer experience. It improves the customer experience in some ways, and enables it, click and collect orders to be done that much more efficiently. So there's going to be something up on Winsight Grocery Business soon about that.
Great. So Jen, why don't you wrap us up with some good news?
Yes, well, we've talked a lot about what grocers and companies are doing to fight hunger right now, because the newest stat is that 40% of the people who are showing up to get food from food banks are this is the first time they've ever gone to a food bank to get food. So Albertsons recently announced that they are donating almost $14 million to a variety of organizations that fight hunger from coast to coast, where they have stores through its Nourishing Neighbors community support. So that's much needed.
Great. That's great. And is it $14 million in cash or $14 million in food that they're donating?
It's in grants that are awarded to these individual organizations that fight hunger. That's
fabulous. Well, thank you all for joining us today on Winsight Live. As always, you can see previous episodes on Winsight Grocery Business, Restaurant Business, CSP, and SupermarketGuru.com. And don't forget, add your comments. We check them throughout the week, and we will see you back next week, next Tuesday, right here, 9:30 a.m. Pacific and 12:30 p.m. Eastern. Have a great week. Be safe and wear a mask.